So let's get this on. How's it going today, guys? Today we're going to talk about adrenal fatigue. It's a very accurate diagnosis nowadays in the holistic field. But today we're going to talk about what's really going on in this system of things. See, what's going on is that the holistic model has it somewhat right, but somewhat wrong, and the conventional model has it somewhat right and somewhat wrong. Because both of them wrestle with each other. On the conventional side says, well, the adrenals cannot just fatigue unless you have, clinical adrenal disease, such as Addison's disease or adrenal insufficiency. So today we're going to talk about what's really going on in adrenal fatigue. We're just going to use that label today because it's the most known one. But so in 1936, there was a man named Hans Seil, and he came up with this model. He won a Nobel Prize for this, by the way, of what is called the general adaptation syndrome. Basically, when your body's under a lot of stress, if it goes unrelented, you can go into this part right here, the exhaustion stage. And this is true. This is actually what happens, because he did this on mice, and he put an extreme amount of stress on them, and they ended up dying, actually, from the unrelented stress on them. So how it works in the body, basically, when you have a stressor, it depicts it pretty well. You have a rise in stress hormones like cortisol, norepinephrine, and epinephrine to help you deal with the stress that is at hand. So that's when you go into stage 2. And this is where adaptation, as it says, resources are mobilized to combat stressors and body maintains a higher level of resistance. So, this is pretty normal, stage 1 and stage 2 for an everyday thing. Now, if you reach this stage, you have a big problem on your hands. This is usually when people see their doctors, like something is wrong. They're depressed, they have no energy, they're cold, they have low blood pressure, they get dizzy when they stand up, they have a high tendency to... What differentiates these people from somebody that's depressed, because that's what conventional doctors will most likely tell them, is that these people suffering from this tend to have a mental motivation to do things, but they just don't have the energy to do it. Whereas a depressed person that's extremely depressed, they don't have even the mental drive to do anything. So this can be very frustrating for somebody because they'll be thrown that diagnosis of depression, and it's not really depression on what's going on. The body's exhausted of resources, and it's doing it on purpose, actually, to protect you from more stress. So this is the body's response to unrelented. If stage 2 keeps going on, the body will shut it down and put you into stage 3 in order to protect you from keep engaging in the stressor, whatever it is. It could be inflammation in massive quantities in the body from a horrible diet. It could be, usually it's a mixture, though. It's always a mixture of everything. It's somebody's bad diet alongside with some traumatic events, alongside with, outside sources such as divorce and very severe stressors. I mean, this is why people get like chronic fatigue syndrome or fibromyalgia, usually right after a heavy virus or an extremely dramatic situation. So here we have a pretty good model of what goes on. So in the brain, we have what they call the amygdala, and I like to refer to it as the gunslinger of the body. So the amygdala's job is to keep you in like survival mode, okay? And I call it the gunslinger because if it notices anything dangerous, okay, it can take over the whole body like that, okay? It's a survival function organ, okay? And as you can see, it's connected to the hippocampus, which is part of the prefrontal cortex for logical thought, reasoning, and stuff like that. And actually, what happens in a stressful situation, like if you're having like a panic attack or a very, very traumatic situation, the amygdala can hijack the rational thinking side of your brain. And this is why people with like panic attacks and stuff like that, when they're in a panic attack, they're not really thinking rationally. They're not thinking logically. They're thinking to survive. Because their reptilian brain, it's one of the best, actually the oldest name for it, is thinking something's wrong, even though somebody with like panic disorder, there might not be nothing wrong, right? So here's how it works. So the amygdala triggers the hippocampus, and it literally will take it over. We call it the amygdala hijack. And the amygdala stimulates the hypothalamus, okay, which is connected to the autonomic nervous system. And then what it does is it sends a chemical called CTH, or corticotropic releasing hormone, or CRF, to ACTH, which is adrenal corticotropic releasing hormone, which then stimulates the adrenal cortex and the adrenal medulla as well. So we have to differentiate the two there. The adrenal cortex is responsible for making glucocorticoids, or your cortisol levels. So the adrenal medulla is responsible for making adrenaline and epinephrine. Okay, now we have to make a difference between the two, because one of them doesn't make you feel as horrible. Okay, cortisol doesn't make you feel as horrific as adrenaline does, right? Adrenaline is the body's last resort as a stress handling chemical when it comes to stressors. It really doesn't want to use adrenaline unless it really is in a situation. Maybe you're about to get in a fight, maybe 3 people are trying to beat you up. Your body needs to assess whether to run or whether to fight. Okay, that's why it's called fight or flight mode. Okay, you either fight or you're going to take flight. I'd hope you take flight in some of these situations. So that's what's going on here. When this happens, of course, you're going to get a change in blood pressure, heart rate, muscle contraction, because the body sees it as it needs to get blood to the extremities more so than it does digestion, and it needs to get blood to the brain and heart more than anything else in the body. So it needs to get blood to those I just named the most. Okay, and this is why when somebody's stressed out, they'll have stomach issues, digestion problems, ulcers, things like that. They are not in their parasympathetic nervous system, which is part of the autonomic nervous system, which is part of the rest. We call it the rest and digest system for a reason. Okay, this is when your body is digesting. So you can see here kind of how it works. So when this goes on unrelented, you get to stage 3, and I'll tell you why, and I'll show you why right now. So in the body, you have what they call a biofeedback loop, okay? So once this happens, this chain of events, okay, the hypothalamus sends to the pituitary the signal, and then it signals the adrenal cortex to release cortisol, and also this one's kind of missing it, but the adrenal medulla to release epinephrine and norepinephrine. It then sends a signal back to the hippocampus, okay, and then tells it it's making tons of it, okay, tons of cortisol, tons of stress hormones, right? So up here, as you can see, the hippocampus is communicating with the hypothalamus. This is why it's a feedback loop. Okay, it's feeding feedback to one another. When you reach stage 3, okay, the hypothalamus is basically saying enough is enough. Okay, so the problem's not here. Okay, unless you have adrenal insufficiency, which is a clinical condition which you need to go to the hospital quickly if you have, or Addison's disease. The problem is here, okay? You're not getting signal here. This is why you feel burnt out, okay? For good reason. The body's saying, enough is enough. You need to take a look at your life. You need to stop what you're doing, okay? Or I'm going to stop you for you. Because what usually happens, usually type A personalities develop this, is people will go into stage 2 or slight stage 3 and they ignore the symptoms and just keep drinking caffeine and more stimulants and pushing their body more and more. After a while, the body just has enough of it and says, you know what, you're not going to listen to the symptoms, I'm going to make you listen. Okay? That's the most accurate depiction of what's going on here. Okay? But your adrenals are just fine. Just like conventional medicine says, that's why they call it a hoax. Because they're like, well, the adrenals don't burn out unless you have, and it'll show on blood tests, and they're correct to a certain extent. However, their model's broken as well when you think about it. I mean, think about it, because they will go on to say, okay, that you can have suboptimal thyroid function. Okay, you can have suboptimal ovary function, suboptimal testy function of hormone production for all of those organs. But with the adrenals, conventional medicine says, oh no, they either work or they don't. Okay? And you can see there's a big problem with that. I mean, the logic in that is, the rationale in that is kind of ridiculous when you think about it. But I mean, this up here, what's interesting, this guy up here that discovered this was a psychologist, actually, clinical, conventional psychologist that discovered that. So, I mean, it's not, there definitely is a cortisol problem, okay? The problem is just not here, it's up here, okay? That's where the problem's at, okay? So we got to get that clear, okay? Now, I did put some of these on here to cope with adrenal burnout. That's what we're just going to call it for this video, because, I mean, that's what it's most commonly known as, right? So, obviously, you want to prioritize self-care, okay? This can include people with adrenal burnout. They're usually overwhelmed by their responsibilities because they don't have a lot of energy, like the slightest of things tip them off and send them on the deep end and trigger their stress response. And, and it doesn't help that, their family members might be getting upset, their wife or their girlfriend or whatever, they're getting upset at them because they're not as functional anymore. That doesn't help. So prioritize self-care. Make sure that you're paying attention to a lot of these things we're about to go through, okay? You don't want to overdo cardio exercise. We all hear it. When you first go to a conventional doctor with this, usually what they'll say is, well, you need to exercise more, right? But you would think, right, if you think about it, why would your body, if it's already burnt out, why do you need to go and do strenuous exercise and put even more stressors on it? Because exercise is a stressor, however you want to cut it, right? You're breaking down muscle tissue, which puts a stressor. It's a good stressor. But even when you're so burnt out, a good stressor can be bad, okay? And so be counterintuitive, especially if you're someone who has adopted the psychology that rigorous exercise cures all, and it doesn't. So this is very common for people to believe. They think, well, I could just run, 2 miles every day and and actually it'll make you worse. It actually will put you in a more catabolic state where, you lose a lot of weight, you up cortisol levels even more, and other hormones will get shunted, because all your hormones are made from pregnenolone, which comes from cholesterol, okay? And the body, when under stress, it doesn't care. It wants stress hormones, okay? It doesn't care about testosterone. It doesn't care about none of that when you're under stress. It wants to survive. So there is a theory and a model, and it's actually true. It's called pregnenolone steal, right? Where you're under so much stress that cortisol is just taking all of the pregnenolone. And this is why when people are under a lot of stress, they don't have sex drive, they don't have a lot of muscle growth. People that overdo it at the gym, usually they're not growing because they're overdoing it at the gym and making too much cortisol without enough anabolic hormones to build them back up and stuff like that. So I can't emphasize this enough, because this is a very common way to think, right? So you need to switch up your diet, obviously. And I also recommend getting a free, most insurances cover it, get a food allergen test done from your doctor, because, most people have food allergies and they don't even know it. It could be eggs, it could be gluten, it could be dairy, it could be things that are worsening your burnout, right? What you're going through and stuff, I remember I had a gluten sensitivity and I didn't know it. And every time I'd like eat pizza, I felt horrible, like brain foggy and weird. And I went and got a blood test done, and I was allergic to gluten. So, I mean, this is very important. So, here's another really important one, guys. So, practice relaxation practices like yoga, meditation, deep breathing to reduce the stress, right? So the reason why that works is because, in your nervous system, you have two branches, okay? You have the parasympathetic nervous system and the sympathetic nervous system. The sympathetic nervous system regulates the stress response, and if you're in the sympathetic nervous system, okay, most of the time, you're going to burn out. Okay, without enough of the stimulation of the parasympathetic nervous system to balance it out. You need both to survive, okay? Both are essential to survive. Meditation has been shown to grow gray matter in the brain, and to grow neuroplasticity, to up GABA levels, which is a calming chemical in your brain, to up serotonin levels, to up dopamine levels. I mean, all around, it just reduces stress, okay? And yoga and all these practices is pretty much the same as meditation, right? It's the same thing, okay? So here's another big one that most people just seem to think they can cheat on, right? And it's focus on getting enough good quality sleep. Sleep is not negotiable when it comes to your health, right? You can't just say, well, I'm going to sleep deprive myself and then I'll sleep for 3 days and then, I can pay it back. No, after a while of that, you will start to feel it, right? So what you want to do is you want to go to bed earlier, usually before 10 p.m. It's a lot better for your circadian rhythm of melatonin and cortisol production. So you want to do this at the same time every day, okay? And if need be, there is some herbs you can take, like, for example, valerian root, L-theanine, melatonin at night can be helpful. These types of things, doing some deep breathing before bed, stuff like that as well. So this is very important, guys. You got to get enough sleep. Aim for at least 8 hours of sleep a night, okay? And if you need more, if you feel like you need more sleep, and you're in burnout, get more sleep. Listen to your body, guys. Listen to your symptoms. I always tell people this, okay? Symptoms are like your body's fire alarm, okay? It's telling you something's wrong, okay? But in our world, we have a tendency to cover up the fire alarm, and the fire's still burning in the body, okay? And that's my analogy I use to that. So make sure you're getting enough sleep, guys, okay? And here's another good one too. I mean, I myself have to work on this, and I've had problems with this. You need to learn to set boundaries with people. Learn to say no, okay? You're not Superman. You can't take on the whole world, help the whole world and all that at the expense of your health and your energy and your all this. I mean, you can just say no, okay? And I've gotten really a lot better at this because I myself have suffered from burnout before. It's really interesting how the conventional model ignores that there is such a thing as adrenal burnout, though. But they actually do have a diagnosis, because I'm in psychology in college. They do have a diagnosis called burnout, but they just don't call it adrenal burnout. It's just called burnout. It has the same symptoms. It's pretty funny to me, ironic. So, natural vitamins and minerals for adrenal fatigue. So you can take vitamin B5, right? This balances cortisol secretions in times of stress, and it also helps produce more cortisol when you're under stress, so you don't go into that burnout phase, right? Vitamin B6 is very important. It restores calm to the nervous system. It also supports all of your neurotransmitters. Without B6, you would get severely depressed. If you look up B6 deficiency, I recommend just taking a B complex, right? But add extra B vitamins on top of the B complex as well. These are water soluble, so you can up the dose as much as needed, and you'll feel the difference for sure. So vitamin C, right? This is a very important one. So with this one, it creates all of your hormones made by the adrenal glands and adrenal function. It pretty much supports all of it, okay? What I recommend with dosing, it's pretty interesting. There's a book called The Mood Cure, and you should take enough vitamin C. You should take the absorbate form instead of the really acidic ascorbic acid one. You're going to get heartburn if you take that one. Take it until you get bowel tolerance. You'll get a little bit of diarrhea, and take as much dosage until you get to that point. And then once you get to that point, reduce back a little bit from it, okay? And for some people, they can eat up to 10,000 milligrams a day. This is very safe. Studies have shown people with cancer were given 200,000 milligrams a day of this right here, okay? So then we have vitamin E, okay? This neutralizes damaged free radicals inside the adrenal glands. It's a very powerful antioxidant as well. So make sure you get enough vitamin E. Calcium produces calming effects and helps restore normal cortisol levels. Yes, it does. But here's the thing. Here's the next one. So magnesium, very important, okay? 90%, there's studies out there, okay? 90% of the United States is deficient in magnesium, okay? And it's important because it's responsible for over 300 reactions in the body, okay? 300. Let that sink in. Including, like it says here, cellular energy production, which is your ATP or mitochondria, which is connected right on to your adrenal glands, and it will help fuel them. And also it's good for muscle relaxation and sleep and a host of other things. I recommend you take these together. These are better together, calcium and magnesium. Okay, trace minerals are very important, okay? So zinc, manganese, selenium, and iodine support overall hormonal balance, right? Careful with zinc unless you get your copper levels tested, because if you take too much zinc, you could trigger copper, not toxicity, but release into the bloodstream, because usually people that have adrenal burnout, they already have copper overload, okay? Because copper is a very stimulating mineral. So, when you want to make sure you don't take too much zinc. If you're going to take zinc, take about 25 to 50 to start and adjust as needed. Don't just start taking a high dose. Please don't, right? Iodine as well, you need to be a little cautious with. Maybe just take the RDA, the recommended daily amount of it at first, and kind of talk with your, if you have a holistic medicine doctor, or talk with your doctor about it. Make sure you have your thyroid tested. Make sure you don't have any type of Hashimoto's disease or hypothyroid or hyperthyroidism before you start messing with iodine, because it's a thyroid mineral, okay? And your thyroid is connected to the adrenals, okay? To your whole body. Astragalus is a adaptogen, right? It bolsters the immune system and reduces inflammation. Anytime you can reduce inflammation in the body, you reduce stress, okay? So all three of these, actually in this one too, rhodiola. So these four, rhodiola, erythro, cordyceps, and astragalus, are all four adaptogens, okay? You kind of have to experiment, because everybody's different with which one you want to use. I can tell you this, rhodiola is a more stimulating one. So if you're already kind of in a nervous type of energy type of stuff, deal like that, I would try to avoid this at first anyways, until you heal later on, okay? And then you can use this one. One that's not on here would be ashwagandha, which stimulates GABA production. It's a lot more calming of an adaptogen. You could take up to 1,000 milligrams of that a day. So erythro is really good as well. It's not as stimulating as well. And as I said up there, the L-theanine. So this one's interesting. So theanine's been shown in studies to increase GABA levels, to balance out dopamine levels, to increase alpha waves in the brain. So it makes it to where, I take it every day. You're calm, but you're not sedated, like as if you took a Xanax or something. Okay, so this is an important one. Passion flower, really good herb, stimulates GABA production. So it says right here, calms stress, eases restlessness, and improves mood and sleep. You could take this with a concoction at night of your melatonin and maybe a theanine and stuff like that to get some good sleep. Now, with Phosphoryl serine, okay, this one right here, phosphatidylserine. That's how you say it. You got to be a little cautious with this one unless you get a salivary cortisol test done and it shows that you're high on cortisol. This would be the number one thing I would say. If you're high on cortisol production all 4 times of the day on a salivary panel, on a cortisol panel, this would be the go-to right here. But if you're already low on cortisol, I think the last thing you want to do is lower it even more. And if you go on Reddit, right, you read some personal testimonies, people will caution against this because they went and used it when they had low cortisol and they got like train wrecked. Okay. So be very careful. Your body's very sensitive when you're going through this condition. Okay, guys? So in this video, that's what I wanted to talk about, is what it really is mostly and some things you can do as well. So as always, my friends, stay healthy. And if you like this video, please like and subscribe. I really hope this helps you guys, and you guys have a good day. Thank you.